Hey guys, we're going live. Here we are. We're on YouTube. We're going to wait a second to make sure everybody joins us. We are having a fireside chat this morning, Sunday morning. It's such a beautiful day. You've got my little fire back here in my solo stove. Here's the view, though, if you want to see. While we wait for people to join, I might even be a minute early. We're going to talk about feminism today. Not really. We're going to talk about choice, and we're going to talk about why I took my husband's last name. It's been a very interesting topic. I actually wrote about it the other day on Facebook. I just started writing, and I couldn't stop. And the thought process was all around less about my reasons and my choice to take John's last name. I recently received my new Social Security card. I am now Mrs. John Faulkner Cornelius II, which is so fancy, right? I think it's such a fancy name. In any event, all of the process of making that change has caused a lot of you and a lot of my family members and my kids and people in my world to question me. Really? You're going to take his last name? Tell me more about that. Or, I thought you were a feminist. And that was the one that really triggered me. Not that I wanted to convince someone that I was a feminist, but that I wanted to ponder why it was such a reaction by them and why they thought that choice meant I was anti-feminism. And let's think about what feminism is. It's really equity, socioeconomic equity for men and women, all genders, all identities. And I am 100% absolutely a feminist. That's the whole point, right? So let me just remind you guys a little bit of my history. So I come from a family of divorce. When I was about 9 years old, my parents got divorced. And I remember my mother jokes and she goes, if it hadn't been for Ms. Magazine, maybe she wouldn't have gotten divorced. So Ms. Magazine was one of the first feminist or women's equal rights magazines that came out back in the 70s. And when she left my father after 21 years, she left the house. So again, very non-traditional divorce here. And not only did she leave the house, she changed her name. She changed her name back to her maiden name. And she used her maiden name for 5-6 years after leaving. And so I was very young and watching this experience. And I'll never forget being I was in the 3rd grade. And I was talking with my teacher one day. So this had just happened. The divorce had just happened. My mother had taken her maiden name back. And my teacher, very nosily, I remember who she was too. She said, "Oh, your mother's name is different than yours." And I said, "Yes, it is." And she said, "Did she get remarried or something?" And I said, "No." "Are your parents divorced?" "Yes." I remember even when you're a little kid, when somebody's being nosy. She was just so confused by it. She'd not seen that. It was so non-traditional back in the 70s. And divorce was a big deal, as it still is. And so when you fast forward 5 years, another very interesting thing happened in our family. My parents got back together. What? So not only had they been divorced for 5 years, then they got back together and eventually they remarried. And eventually, get this, my mother took my father's last name back again. So I have been raised under what I would say is the most feminist thing you could have ever experienced. And my friend said, well, what's the difference between when she took it the first time? And I'd even asked my mother, "What are you doing? Why are you coming back? You'd convinced us that this was the right reason. So what are you doing? Why are you taking Dad's name again? What is going on? Help me understand." Because of these strong equal rights, I'm going to make these choices, influences. And my mother said something that has stuck with me forever. And I want to share this as the number one takeaway today. And she said to me, "This time it's my choice." Really her choice, not society's choice, not tradition's choice. But she made a conscious choice. And that's exactly why I'm taking John's last name. And, there's a lot of reasons. But at the end of the day, the only reason that matters is my own. It's my own. For me, it's romantic. It's traditional. I mean, we can argue about the patriarchy and why the origination of marriage and name change had to do with property transfer. So originally the woman was the property of her own family, and then the transfer of property to a man that she would then be married to, and now she was his property. I get it. Bull. Yeah, that is not what's happening, nor would anyone even think that in this day and age. However, me choosing to then use a piece of that tradition doesn't in no way validate the origin, nor does it demonstrate that I discount that archaic beginning. What it does demonstrate, just like in the women's movement of giving a woman the choice to work full time, be a stay-at-home mom, do whatever she wants to do. That's feminism. That's choice. And for me, I have decided that I like the use of names in my history as part of my identity. As I said in a recent blog I posted on Facebook, I said, it's letters and sounds and it's a connection. That's really what this is for me. Choosing to take John's last name is the same thing as choosing to take John into my world and for him to take me into his. That we, as we come together and we look at the future, we merge, right? That one quote, the further into the future two people can see together, they merge. And I think that's what our marriage is. And I love the merge. And I have kept my previous marriage last name as well because it's part of my business identity. So you will see Nicoa Dunn forever, most likely, until I can just identify as Nicoa. And then maybe one day I'll have like an image like Prince. I'm kidding. I think you get my point. And there was a lot of people that commented on the Facebook post that they said they'd suffered for years over whether or not to take their husband's last name, or they were about to get married. And here's the thing that you're worried about. You're worried about what other people think. You're worried about somebody else's interpretation of your choice. But ultimately, choice has to come down to the rootedness of you knowing who you are and trusting that and believing and having the faith that it doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks. It doesn't really matter. And if we could start putting our focus more internally, not to disconnect and separate from others, but to just say, you know what feels good to me? What feels right? I love being married. I love being a part of something greater than just me. And by choosing to merge into this world with John and his beautiful babies and bringing my babies into this, what a gift. What a privilege. What an honor. That's the story I choose to tell. And at the end of the day, remember my favorite thing to remind you of, you are the only one who can make anything mean anything. So you can make my choices mean whatever you want, but that's you, your story. I know what I make them mean. And here's to me being Mrs. John Faulkner Cornelius. And I hope you too will begin to own your choices without a doubt. Cheers. I love you guys. #Life by Design. I love mine, and you can too.